Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening. It's time!
This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, and this is the all-new MMA Lights Out podcast. And with me, delighted to be joined by Wasim Khan, one of the usual faces of Lights Out. And I'm also delighted to be joined by professional boxer and UFC/MMA junkie, Mr. Micky Mills. For those of you who don't know, Micky Mills has featured on Lights Out many times in the past. He's done many interviews with us as well. Vaz, Micky, good evening. How's it going, guys?
Evening, bro. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, very well.
Good to see you. Excited to have you guys on. I love your setup there, Micky, and of course, Vaz, you're always in that little room of yours where everything just looks pucker. You've got all your notes on your board. You've got your projector in the back, and then of course Micky's gone for the microphone, the headsets. It's good, man. I love that.
And for the works today, man.
Yeah.
For the works.
I'm loving that samurai sword in the back as well. Nice touch.
Thank you, man. I got all sorts going on there. I got a samurai sword. I got some scriptures, all sorts, bro.
Nice.
Brilliant. The organisation is on a different level today. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind the viewers out there, if they haven't already, hit that subscribe button and make sure you're following us on all the social media platforms. We'll obviously be sharing Micky's Instagram platform as well. Of course, we use Vaz's social media as well, which we put up in our Instagram story when the podcast is uploaded onto YouTube. So make sure you guys give him a follow as well on Instagram. And of course, as well, follow us on all those social media platforms. And also today, we'll be bringing in legendary Stitch man, Jacob Stitch Duran, as he has his thoughts on today's podcast. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to do a bit of a recap from last week's action in UFC 257. A great way to start the year for the UFC. It was a very, very good show. I had to stay up very late though, but hey, all worth it in the end. We'll start off with the main event. Conor McGregor stopped in round 2 by Dustin Poirier. Shock, or what? Did you guys see this coming? Me personally, I did mention that being out of the octagon for a year might play its part, and I also mentioned Poirier has looked the best he's ever looked. He's also been the more active fighter, and he really is in a good spot right now. Vaz, no disrespect, but I want to bring in Micky first because Micky loves the UFC, loves the MMA. Not saying we don't have love for the sport, but Micky's been messaging me the last few weeks. He's wanted to jump on this podcast. Micky,
100%.
What's the number one reason why Conor McGregor lost that fight?
Honestly, calf kicks. The calf kicks took a massive toll on him, man. As they do most people, especially if you're not checking them properly. For anybody who has ever taken a calf kick, you know exactly what it feels like. For those of you that have never taken a calf kick before, they're horrible. They are horrible. If you don't check them properly, they're horrible. And it's an awesome way to neutralize someone's front foot. So if you look at McGregor, a lot of the time he was real heavy on that front foot, like a boxer would be. Which leads you to the question: has he been training too much boxing? Because I know he's brought in his boxing coach from the Mayweather fight and stuff like that. Has he been too much boxing? Who knows? But, bro, I think it was the calf kicks. I think it was the calf kicks that really done it. And I think his work rate was beginning to diminish as the knockout came about. And I think Poirier hits a lot harder than people give him credit for.
Vaz, were you all surprised with, I mean, I don't know whether you'd call it an easy victory, but in the manner of which Dustin Poirier defeated Conor McGregor? Because I said if Conor McGregor was going to lose that fight, it would probably go the distance. I never had him losing that way. Was you surprised by the way Poirier defeated McGregor?
I think it comes down to, you know, you called it in. I think we were recording an episode before UFC 257, and it comes down to ring rust for me. You know, the guy, yes, he was fight ready, but he wasn't cage ready. If you get what I mean, you know, he wasn't like. As Micky said, he wasn't checking those calf kicks, and those calf kicks are painful. You know, if you're catching on the bone, that's one thing, but when you're catching it flush on the muscle right there, there's nothing you can do. And I think if he was 1 or 2 fights into his comeback, you know, he would have been better prepared. He would have been checking those calf kicks, and he looked very front foot heavy. You know, and that kind of says to me that, you know, he spent a lot of time boxing rather than a lot of time grappling, because it took him. I think it was round 2. He started checking. You know, he caught the kick a couple of times, but by that point, his leg was gone. He couldn't. You know, his stance was different. He couldn't put pressure on that back foot, and he was done. So it was kind of no surprise when he got caught. You know, he wasn't hurt per se, but he couldn't put any pressure on his feet, so he was out. So you know, for me, I think ring rust played a combination. I think, you know, I think he spent too much time boxing, not enough time grappling to be ready. So a couple of factors, but you know, he's called for the rematch. He wants an immediate rematch, which I doubt he'll get. But you know, a couple of fights, I think he'll be back to the Conor we know.
You know, I look at it from one point of view. That's 2 defeats in the last 3 fights, and then obviously, you know, he's had that stint in boxing as well. And I said in the last week's podcast, I said, I'm not buying this return back to the sport for legacy or to, you know, redeem himself against the likes of Khabib. I just think it's a case of make as much money as possible from now till whenever he decides to retire. And that's not me like trying to be disrespectful in any way to Conor McGregor, because he's achieved a lot in the sports, you know, but I do think that we're talking about a fighter that is probably past his best now. I think the level he fought at on Saturday night against Poirier, I don't think he goes any higher than that level. I think if he fought someone like Khabib again, he would get absolutely annihilated. But Khabib would probably do it over a longer period, just to, you know, because of the rivalry between them two. Mickey, what's next for Conor McGregor? I mean, as a fan, what do you want to see him do next? Because he's a guy that, regardless of what happened, sorry to disturb you, regardless of what happened on Saturday night, it's just as you said, there's so much options and opportunities out there for Conor McGregor.
Yeah, there is. You got to look at not just the ticket sales aspect of it. He obviously wants to fight, and I also think something needs to be said about the way he's handled loss. So the previous times he has, the way he handled that loss against Poirier was obviously nothing short of spectacular. Let's be honest. The way he's been, like, you know, shaking people's hands and being like, you know, I lost to a better guy. Could you have seen that a few years ago? Probably not from that guy. So he's clearly matured as a fighter.
Humble in victory, humble in defeat, right? That's his.
Absolutely, man. And his first loss against Diaz was when I first become a real big fan, man. When he first see him lose against Diaz and the way he handled that, I thought, that's who I'm going to be if I ever find myself in that position. And I feel it's something that has to be said about that. However, what do you see next? You've got the Diaz trilogy, huge numbers that will produce insane numbers. Obviously, you got the Khabib second fight. If it goes ahead, that would also obviously pulling Khabib back into the sport. Would he do it? Wouldn't he do it? Me personally, no, I don't think he would. I don't think he'd go there again. Number one, he doesn't have to. Because he has beat him, and number two, why would you take the risk if what McGregor is saying is true, which is he had a balloon foot and he wasn't at his best? Would you take that risk? Probably not. You've also got the Poirier trilogy, which makes more sense from a business standpoint because there's a chance they put the title on the line if Khabib doesn't come back. And also on top of that, you've got everybody else in that division who wants a piece of him. You've got Gaethje, by the way, who's an unbelievable fighter, who Poirier stopped, which is huge because Gaethje's hard as nails. You've got Dan Hooker, unfortunately, got knocked out, but you've got who's the lad that Dan Hooker fought? Chandler. Yeah. But to be honest, if they come out and they give Chandler a title shot off of his debut, you'd be like, come on, man. What about everybody else? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then again, Dana White has done some wild stuff before, so you never know, man. You never know.
It's you just mentioned all those names. It's so exciting, that division right now. You make a handful of fights. Vaz, is the next move potentially going to be his route back into boxing? Because, I mean, we're talking about a guy that's only fought once in boxing, but then again, the name Conor McGregor sells itself.
So I think I said this to you in the last episode, right? I disagree with you on the reasons why he came back. I don't think he's come back for the money, right? He's got enough money. You know, he's got his whiskey company, he's got his training company, he's got all sorts of other stuff going on. So he's got enough money, right? He's come back he wants that highlight reel. He wants the knockouts. He wants the legacy. He is a fighter. That's all he knows, right? So for me, I think he's gonna, you know, the loss is gonna hurt him hard. do what he needs to do. He'll get back in the gym. He'll train. I think Dana's going to take it easy on him and give him a warm-up fight. He'll get a tune-up. So somebody like, you know, Rafael Dos Anjos, who he was supposed to fight, or Ala Quinta. He's talked about fighting those guys. You know, Ala Quinta, I think, is ranked 14th. Dos Anjos is still a good name. He's ranked 8th in the division. So I think he'll get a tune-up fight, and then they'll throw him in with you know, either a Poirier or somebody a bit more.
That's
serious.
a good match make from you, bro. That's a very good match. I didn't even think of that. Dos Anjos, man. Chuck him in with it, bro. Chuck him in with Dos Anjos, because obviously he pulled out, didn't he, originally? So yeah, 100%. That'll make a good fight, and he gets his win back. And he goes, yeah.
Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn. If you're looking for a matchmaker, contact Vaseem Khan. I'll put his 100%. Email address in the description. Let's not take nothing away from Dustin Poirier, though. I don't think a lot of people I knew never gave him a chance going into the fight. He's really grown since that first defeat all the way back in 2014 to Conor McGregor. Mickey, what's next for Dustin Poirier? There's so many options out there, but what do you want to see him do next? Me personally, I want to see him go straight to the Khabib fight. Doubt it will happen, though. Mickey, your thoughts? What's next for Dustin Poirier?
I wouldn't put him in with Khabib after he got choked out like that, like McGregor did. They both got choked out the same way, you know what I mean? And Khabib, if he's thinking about coming back, I can't see him fighting someone he's fought before, if I'm honest. I've always thought if Khabib comes back, it's for GSP. So if that happens, I'll be buzzing, but I don't know if it will. For Poirier, honestly, the McGregor trilogy is the only one that really, truly makes sense at the moment. What's he going to do? Is he going to fight Chandler and give for the title? Doubt it. Doesn't make any sense. Poirier's gone through his career, of ups and downs from what I've seen, and he never seems to get the credit he deserves, especially with his boxing, man. That guy can box. I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm saying it here now, I wouldn't be surprised if a money boxing fight comes out of the woodwork, bro. I wouldn't be surprised because he can genuinely box. It would be weirder things have happened, let's be honest.
Well, if you'd have said in 2017, the biggest fight of the year is going to be Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, we would have all laughed at your face.
Man.
So, and you're right, anything can happen. And, that fight in 2017 that's going to open a lot. I know it's been quite a few years ago. That's going to open more doors for boxers and UFC to come together. I believe both sports should come, the MMA and boxing should work together in the future anyway. I think they should put on shows together where you get to see half the show boxing and half the show MMA. It'd be brilliant. I think both sports need to work together with what's going on. Vaz, as we mentioned, there's endless amount of options now for Dustin Poirier. I mean, is now the right time for him to be looking to, become the number one name of the division? Would you go after Khabib, or do you think Michael Chandler or a third fight with McGregor is the best option for him?
Khabib's done, right? He's retired. The only fight that Khabib's going to come back for is GSP. That's it. There's no other fight for him. He said himself, like, Dana needs to give me an 8-figure number to come back for, and the only fight that's going to generate any numbers is GSP. So there's one monster in that lightweight division that no one's talking about, Charles Oliveira. That's the fight to make. Guy's an absolute monster, phenomenal run. Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, Dustin versus Oliveira. That is the fight to make. Both have got great ground game. Both can box. Both can grapple. Like, for me, that's the fight to make. I think in terms of Chandler, they'll give him what's his name, Khabib's leftovers. For me, Oliveira, that is the fight to make in the division.
Well, before we move on, I promise you guys that we'll be bringing you a little bit from legendary Stitchman Jacob Stitch Duran. For those of you who don't know, he's been in the boxing game and the MMA game for a long time. He's also featured on big boxing movies such as Rocky Balboa, Creed 1 and 2. And he gave us his thoughts on Dustin Poirier's victory over Conor McGregor, what next for Conor McGregor, and perhaps what next for the rest of that division. What was your thoughts on Dustin Poirier's win over the notorious Conor McGregor?
Well, it wasn't a surprise by any means. I've worked with them both. I know the capabilities of Dustin. And it's funny because my son-in-law was going to watch the fights, and he asked me what I thought. And I said, the thing about it, I've always liked Conor as a fighter. Tough kid to definitely, back up what he could do. But, the only thing you can't beat is time. And the time that he's been away from what he does, his specialty, could be a detriment to him. Plus, not only that, but, he's done so much. He has a liquor brand. He's been spending a lot of money doing a lot of traveling and not really in the game where Dustin stayed focused. So, like I say, and I wasn't surprised, but I'm never surprised because in this game, everybody is capable of doing some damage.
Going into the fight, of course, their first fight was all the way back in 2014, which Conor McGregor won very convincingly. Who did you have as the favorite going into this second fight?
I don't pick them, bro. It's the thing about it. I've worked with so many of them. Like I say, it's like me picking you over Amir Khan. I can't do that. So I don't pick them. I just, and people ask me all the time. I said, the way I look at fights are what are the probability of a cut man being used for that type of fight, and that's the way I look at them. But yeah, it's too many guys that I've worked with one-on-one, but Dustin never surprised me. That's for sure.
With his win, it puts him in a really good place, especially in that exciting division right now. We also heard what Conor McGregor said, that he vows to continue fighting in the UFC. We also know that he's still interested in having another crack in the boxing world. There's plenty of opportunities for them both out there. But let's start off with Dustin Poirier. What would you like to see him do next? Would you like to see a third fight between him and Conor McGregor? Or do you think he should be looking at the likes of perhaps Michael Chandler and Khabib as his next potential opponent?
Yeah, well, I think, Khabib probably scratch him off the list, right? But Michael Chandler, I think, they're both guys that are starting to make some kind of impression in the UFC. Michael Chandler just, came in and had his first fight after leaving Bellator. But that's the match I almost guarantee you is going to happen.
As for Conor McGregor, it's a defeat. We all know that he's really wanted to get that Khabib rematch. How much of a setback do you see this as trying to get that rematch with Khabib?
Well, I think it's big. Why? The question would be why, outside of just the economics. But, when you go to matching guys one-on-one, after a defeat, how do you go after a guy that is, for the most part, undefeated? So I think that's going to be a hard match to follow up. And, I don't know how big the pay-per-view numbers would be on that. But, same with Khabib. He's in a position now where he could take it or leave it, so we'll see. We'll see what kind of marketing goes with that, how Dana goes and sells himself to these guys and try to make it a viable fight.
You mentioned that you worked with Conor McGregor in the past, so I take him you know him quite well personally. Looking back on the defeat, what do you think is the next best option for Conor McGregor in terms of the rest of his career?
Well, you definitely got to evaluate, what he wants to do and where's he at this time. And like I say, the number one factor in any athlete is time. You could beat anything, but you can't beat time. And, that's an old adage. But then the desire, that's the main thing, especially in the mixed martial arts. You have to have a desire to do what you do, to get in the gym and work hard. And it has to be a full-time job. And I don't know if he is going to want to do this on a full-time basis. He's already achieved everything, like Andre Ward, working with Andre Ward. Like I say, I've achieved everything that I needed to achieve. And the same thing with Conor McGregor. At what point does he go and say, you know what, I've done it. I'm going to go out there and enjoy my life. And, my faculties are still good and my body's still okay. So that's something he has to weigh on himself and see if he wants to continue or just, enjoy the fruits of his labor.
If we rewind back to, 2017 when, it was shocking at the time, but he took on Floyd Mayweather. He gave boxing a crack. Some people would say he, gave a good showing against Floyd Mayweather. Some people would say that boxing is quite a lot different to MMA, and boxing is not for Conor McGregor now. Over the last few weeks, there's been talks about Conor McGregor perhaps taking a fight with Manny Pacquiao. We've also heard Jake Paul interested in taking on Conor McGregor in the boxing world. Would you like to see Conor McGregor back in the boxing ring at some point in his career?
The thing with Floyd is it was a big mismatch. Floyd is such a great fighter, And I know Floyd. I'm in his gym all the time, you know, and I've known him since, you know, he came out of the Olympics and started living in Las Vegas and training. You know, and I know the whole family and I know his character. And when I saw him fighting Conor and he's down on the bottom, his head down below him, I'm thinking, what's he doing? You know, but then you go to realize that he had so much confidence that he could do that because he's never done that in a fight before. You know, on the marketing standpoint, that was a masterpiece. Yeah, Manny Pacquiao, the same thing. Manny would be a very, very difficult guy for him to fight. If he would do something, I would book him with Jake Paul. You know, I've worked with KSI when he fought Logan Paul, and worked with Anson Gibb when he fought Jake Paul. And, you know, and I know Jake Paul and I know BJ Penn, his coach, and all that. And that would be more of a attraction than anything else. Even Floyd fighting Logan Paul, to me, is something that just, it doesn't make sense. On the marketing side, not as much sense as if Conor McGregor is going to fight somebody like Jake Paul.
Would you want to see Conor McGregor back in the boxing ring, whether it's regarding fighting Manny Pacquiao or perhaps Jake Paul or anyone else?
Nah, I would say him if it was Jake Paul because it's a social media type of event. But, you know, to go after a top-notch fighter like Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, you know, Terrence Crawford, any of these guys, that's two different levels, bro.
You obviously stated just a little while ago that Michael Chandler versus Dustin Poirier would be the fight to make next in that division. Chandler put on a stunning performance, a tremendous debut in the UFC with a first-round knockout win over Dan Hooker. Were you surprised by Michael Chandler's performance and his win over Dan Hooker and in the manner that he did it?
Well, I didn't see the fights, but no, you know, I'm not surprised that, you know, Michael, I've worked with him, you know, when I was with Bellator, after the UFC let me go, I was the guy that worked with Michael Chandler all the time by his recommendations. And as a matter of fact, he had called me one time before he left his last fight with Bellator and asked if I would work his corner, but I already had another event already booked, so I couldn't do it. But yeah, he's a tough kid, man. I think that's, you know, that's the type of fight where you look at it as me as a cut man is I hope they each have a good cut man in their corner because I could see blood on both of them.
After the fight, Michael Chandler called out, you know, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, you know, Khabib as well. How do you think he gets on against them three if those fights were to happen?
Oh, he's definitely at that level, you know, no doubt about it. You know, it's just a matter of because everything is sales and marketing. Michael Chandler definitely capability is one of those guys, you know, but, you know, do the UFC fans know him as well as the Bellator fans knew him? And I think that's a key element, but he can fight, man. You know, big fan of his, big fan of Dustin Poirier, of course, Conor McGregor, you know, how can you not be fans of him? Khabib, you know, I remember working with Khabib early in his career, and first thing he did is he promised me one of those hats, you know, so, and then I left, so I never got one, but he has enough respect for me where he would come and acknowledge me.
Interesting comments there made by Stitch Duran. And for those of you who would like to see the rest of that interview, the link is in the description below. Make sure you guys check that out. It's a very interesting interview with the legendary Jacob Stitch Duran. He gives his thoughts on the whole Wilder Fury situation, what next for the heavyweight division. And there's a lot more we talk about as well, including his time being a part of the great boxing movies such as Rocky Balboa, Creed 1 and 2. Your thoughts on his comments there, Vaz, start with you. What he makes is for the future of the rest of this exciting division we've got in the UFC right now between the likes of Khabib, McGregor, Poirier, Chandler, and Hooker, and so on.
Yeah, I totally agree with him. If I'm honest, the guy, he's a legend. He knows what he's talking about. He's trained with, you know, he's trained with all of them. You know, he's looked after all of them. He knows the UFC sort of inside out. But you know, for me, the two standout names are Poirier and Oliveira. They're sort of the future of the division. I think it's too early to, you know, you got to look at Chandler's age. You know, he's an old guy coming into the UFC in terms of his experience, who he's lost to, who he's fought. For me, Oliveira, Poirier, that's the future of the division.
Mickey, he mentioned that he would have loved to have worked with Conor McGregor for the Floyd Mayweather fight because he knows he's got so much knowledge about boxing. Now, of course, you're a professional fighter yourself. You know how important camp is. I've been around you during camp. I've been around you during fight night, before the fight, and after the fight. How much you know, you said it yourself. What a coup for Lights Out getting him on the channel. How much do you think he could potentially help Conor McGregor if he does go back into the boxing world, or how much do you think he could help any of these guys, not only just in boxing but also for the rest of their career in the UFC?
When you look at someone like Stitch, and you look at and you just know there's like the guy oozes knowledge, doesn't he? You know what I mean? Just be around him and asking questions would be enough. You wouldn't need the guy in your corner. You know what I mean? Just catch him for 5 minutes, you'd be asking all the questions you need to. He's that kind of guy. What do I think he does? Is McGregor the type of person to accept people into his camp? I don't think he is, if I'm honest. I don't think he would take anybody in other than the people that he's within the circle. As you can see, he's always had the same circle around him. But I was excited. I was quite interested in what he had to say about McGregor fighting Jake Paul, if I'm honest. Because that fight, to me, not only is that the fight that I want, Jake Paul, but it's the fight that at the moment, for some reason, is up there. Like, everybody's like, I see Ariel Helwani. I don't know if you see Ariel Helwani. He does a lot of journalism on MMA. He did an interview with a guy, and he's just come up with some wild stuff. So would I like to see McGregor go into the boxing world for that? Everybody knowing it's a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's a bit, mismatch. We know where it's going.
Yeah.
Mismatch would be a light word for it. You know what I mean? But then again, you've got Mayweather fighting Logan Paul. So what's next? Honestly, I don't know what's next.
Right? Here's the thing. Is it a mismatch? Right? You look at the guys he's training with. Like he's there training with, you know, he's got some serious names in his corner. So
yeah, I see him with Jorge Masvidal this morning.
Exactly. He's there training with Masvidal, and you know you're going to learn a thing or two if you're training with Masvidal. But,
absolutely.
And no. Listen, Vaz, I've got a lot of respect for you, and I love your knowledge on MMA and boxing. But let's get one thing straight: no chance in hell does this guy have any chance. Listen, you could put him in a ring with Fury, Joshua, mate. We're talking about he's going to go up against one of the greatest of all time. He's going to get his ass whooped. It's not a sport to be played with. Thank you, Mickey. Thank you.
He's going to get his ass whooped.
No, but I'm talking about if he was to fight McGregor, not Mayweather.
I still think McGregor whoop his ass.
In any form of combat, the person with the more experience is an immediate advantage, right? Yeah. In any form of combat. It's not like football. You know, you see a kid step onto a football pitch and you think, Jesus Christ, that kid can play, man. Do you know what I mean? Just immediately good, scoring goals, making passes, all that kind of stuff. Right. With fighting, it's a little bit different. There's so many more aspects to go in, and the experience is almost like a dilution of those aspects. Does that make sense? Like,
No. I fully hear you. And I kind of agree with some of what you're saying. Where I disagree, right? We're training for MMA and training for boxing is they're two totally different disciplines. You know, yes, you're using your hands, but it is a different discipline. And whatever you say about McGregor, he's a highly skilled mixed martial artist, right? That's his background, that's his pedigree. He's not a boxer. Yeah.
You're right. And like you said, in terms of they're two different things. I mean, I've trained in both. I've trained boxing for a lot of my life, and I've luckily done a lot of MMA in my past and still to this present day. They are two so different sports. I know exactly what you're saying. If one was to focus purely on boxing, the other person was to do their normal MMA routine, the boxing advantage would slowly creep up. Even if they were like Jake Paul, who has that doesn't count as experience to me. That the fights he's been having doesn't count as experience. Should they though? Because they are in front of a crowd. There is a camp involved. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think one thing we've got to look at the fact that I remember after the McGregor-Mayweather fight, Tony Bellew described McGregor's punching as horrendous. And it was horrendous. And I agree with Mickey, like boxing and MMA, that you're training for two total different sports. Now, where you got to give McGregor credit to is I think McGregor deep down knew what was going to happen. And I mean, just by watching that fight with Floyd Mayweather, a lot of people actually gave the first 2 rounds to Conor McGregor. But if you watch the fight back and you see Floyd when he sat in his corner, he's not worried. He's not thinking, God, this guy's... He knew. I'll take him past
game plan, 100% part of the strategy.
But I believe Stitch said something along the lines of where Floyd knew what he was doing. Floyd didn't have to put on an A-star performance. And once he got past those first 3 rounds, it was a complete different fight. I mean, I believe fatigue played a part in it. McGregor, there was no combinations, you know, the footwork was bad. So when Mickey says that they're two total different sports, and to train for both of them at the same time, it is a big ask. But, you know, any type of combat sport training for it is a big ask.
But that's why Jake Paul versus McGregor makes sense. You know, it makes sense from a number
from money for money wise. For money wise, you got Jake Paul saying, "I'll send you $50 million right now." For money wise, it's a big thing, and you know, for publicity wise, it's a big thing. But I would guarantee you, it would suck as a boxing match.
I agree. And the reason it makes sense, or any fight with these names involved makes sense, because us a lot of sitting here speaking about it right now. So they've already acquired what they need. We're making a conversation of it. The one thing I will say, though, from the experience of both, is the distance in boxing. The understanding of the distance is so different to MMA. Like the distance within boxing, you know where things are coming from. You know where your hands are. The amount of space that your glove covers up in boxing is so much more than that tiny 4-ounce glove in MMA. Forever, especially in MMA sparring, getting caught on the top of the head, the bottom of the chin that you think you've covered when you haven't. The gaps are huge in MMA, and the space between you and your opponent, especially when you're sparring, is so much bigger because you've got these teeps, you've got these low kicks, you've got these front kicks, you've got all these kind of other parts of your arsenal that you can throw. So if someone was to be training in purely MMA, and someone was to be training in boxing, and they go into a boxing match, like you said, they're an immediate advantage, a person who's been training in boxing. However, I want to knock Jake Paul out. So I loved it.
One thing I like about this podcast is we got Vazu showing off his matchmaking skills, and we've got Mickey who's showing off his tactical insight into the sport. If Sky Sports, anyone is watching, sign these two guys up. They know their shit. We're going to have to move on, and we're going to talk about the co-main event, Michael Chandler defeating Dan Hooker. I don't know about you guys, but for me, that's probably one of the best debuts I've seen in UFC. But you know what I thought was even better? The way he called out Khabib, McGregor, and Poirier at the end of the fight. A lot of people had him going into that fight, not winning that fight, because Hooker put up a very, very tremendous effort in his last fight against Poirier. But listen, Michael Chandler, what a phenomenal debut, what a phenomenal performance. I'm excited. The guy's 33, 34 years old. I'm very excited to see what's next for him. Mickey, thoughts on the performance? What's next as well for Michael Chandler? And how does he hang with the big boys in that division?
He's a strong dude, that's for sure. That guy was putting the pressure on consistently, and you don't see Hooker hurt very often. You don't see that guy back down from a scrap. And Chandler had this. It was like a tap and an overhand right, wasn't it, that tagged him? I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, that guy must possess some power. I don't know how much he cut prior to that. That was my question. I was thinking, I wonder how much weight he cut to make that, and how much he was going into the cage. What's next for him? I mean, I don't want to say the Poirier fight for the title, because that just doesn't make it. I mean, it does make sense, but it doesn't, because everybody on Earth is just going to be like, "Are you joking me? What about everybody else?" I think he's got another fight, or another two fights before he meets at that top level, that top tier. Who do I see him fighting? I don't know, bro. Honestly, that's a tough one, man. I truly don't know. I think maybe Gaethje, maybe someone like that, an exciting like clash of just aggression, man. See what happens. Also, Gaethje's an unbelievable wrestler.
I'd love to see him fight Ferguson or Gaethje as well. I think they're two very good fights. Vaz, would you call this guy Michael Chandler the bogeyman of the division, because he's come out, 3-time Bellator world champion? A lot of people, obviously following the build up to UFC 257, a lot of people had this guy going in there and getting beat. I mean, what would you agree with those comments? The bogeyman of the division, and how far can you go?
I was one of those guys, right? I had Hooker winning. I picked Hooker to win. I thought Hooker's going to keep it long, use his height, use his reach, keep it long, and take him out. But that didn't happen. The guy was. You look at the way he used his size, he used his strength, he was aggressive. I think to call him the bogeyman of the division is probably the right thing. I think it's going to be hard picking a fight for him, because who in the top 10 would willingly want to fight him? But for me, I think they'll either put him in with before they match him up with Gaethje, they'll throw like a Paul Felder in front of him. They owe Paul Felder a payday after what they did to him in his last fight. it came in at short notice. So I think they'll give they'll set him up with Felder as the next fight. If he wins that, they'll then give him Gaethje and then set it up for a title fight.
Well,
that's how I would play.
MMA rankings have got Chandler 5th in the ranking after his UFC debut. I believe that's one of the best UFC debuts I've seen. That is one of the best because, you got to look at it, right? I mean, it is a bit of a step up from Bellator to UFC. And, Dan Hooker's no pushover. I love watching Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker for me is he's like the Arturo Gatti of UFC. You're just going to get non-stop excitement with him.
Yeah.
And I think to come in on that show, which was, let's be honest, no disrespect to anyone else on the card, that show was getting the publicity because the return of the notorious Conor McGregor. It's a second fight with Dustin Poirier. Could the winner of this fight potentially bring Khabib back into the sport? But I think to come out and do that, and then to the call out, the way he just stood in that middle of the ring, see you at the top. The guy's got balls, man. He's 33 years old, but he's no pushover. And the division right now in UFC, I think that division is more exciting than the 135 division in boxing right now. I mean, if you had to compare the two, and I know it's a bit of a wild comparison to make. Everyone's talking about the fuss behind, the 135 division in boxing, that saying it's the best division in all combats. I think this division right now is even better because there's so many big names in there. There's so many fights to be made. And then you've also, as you guys mentioned, Khabib, does he ever come back into the sport? What next for Conor McGregor? So many question marks over what happens next. And of course, what happens next is obviously all down to Dana White. But guys, I'm going to have to ask you the questions. You're big fans. You've got a lot of love for the sport. What do you think is the next move for Michael Chandler, for Conor McGregor? What honestly do you guys see happening next? I mean, there's what you want.
I want to correct you on one thing very quickly. Not the best debut. Impressive debut, not the best, right? Frankie Edgar, UFC 67, probably one of the best fights I've ever seen. One of the best debuts. Frankie Edgar, nobody was giving him a chance.
We're just going to have to agree to disagree, Dave.
And Junior Dos Santos, mate, UFC 90, Fabricio Verdum took him out. 1 minute 21, round one, boom. But,
yeah. You know what? My favorite, the best debut I think I've ever seen was CM Punk, man. I think we CM Punk, get the fuck out of here. What are you doing, bro?
Fingers crossed, bro.
I was a WWF fan, man.
Listen, I've got my fingers crossed for Sunday night that CM Punk returns in the Royal Rumble, okay? Don't diss the great CM Punk.
Matchmaking 101, bro. CM Punk versus Jake Paul. Stick them in a boxing ring. See what happens, man. Let's go.
Hey.
Come on, guys. Break it down to me. What I mean, there's obviously what we want to happen next, but what do you guys realistically see happen next?
I realistically on the whole structure of things, I think Poirier and McGregor have their trio. I think Gaethje fights Chandler, or someone along those lines. I think Gaethje. I don't know, man. That's a really tough one because do you chuck him in with someone who, you know what I mean, almost like you say a Paul Felder, or do you just chuck him in again because he just knocked out Hooker, bro, and Hooker's been mauling people. So who knows? I think Poirier and McGregor do the trilogy, and that makes some money. I think McGregor comes back, looks different. And I say it, I think he does it this time, bro. I think he gets it because he has a tendency to do so. He does honestly.
Bookies have already got him as favourite, Bookies have got...
already?
Yeah, honestly. He's favourite.
Oh, my God. I mean, I know that's a big ask, man, but you never know, bro. And I said this last time. I got a message from my boy Dan. He said to me, Poirier's going to drop it. Poirier's going to stop him within the first 2 rounds. And I was like, get the hell out of here, bro. Weird things have happened. So I think everybody's thinking Poirier's going to school him again. McGregor comes in, starches him. Who knows, man? That's what I think anyway.
What about you, Vaz? What realistically happens next for you in this all-exciting division?
I think they're going to stick. I think they're going to give him Felder than Gaethje. I see that happening. I think McGregor's going to get a tune-up fight. They'll either give him somebody like Ala Quinta, Rafael dos Anjos, or somebody of that stature, and then they'll throw him in with Poirier, and it'll be I think next for Dustin, they're going to give him Oliveira. Whoever wins that fight, Poirier needs to come through that fight, and then that will set up the trilogy.
Realistically, what I can see happening next is Poirier. I agree with you with the Oliveira thing, and I do think Chandler does fight someone like a Gaethje or a Ferguson, because I don't think they're going to want to push him into that deep end straight away with the likes of the Poiriers, the McGregors. I think they, as I believe as Mickey mentioned, another 1-2 more fights before those fights happen. But I'm excited to see what happens with Michael Chandler next. But I'm just ever more excited to see what happens with Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, and I'm hoping Khabib does come out of retirement, but it's got to be for, he said it. He goes, look, to get me back into this, man, you've got to give me something to. Someone's got to excite me. But if you look, but he says excitement. Would you not say those 2 knockouts we've seen on last Saturday night were exciting to see? They were results that you never saw happening. But again, I do believe there's Khabib up there, and then there's the rest of the division. That's no disrespect, but I think Khabib is just on another level right now. But I'm praying he does not go anywhere near a boxing ring, because I know temptation's a motherfucker. I've seen him talk about Floyd Mayweather too many times. I don't want.
He put on Twitter he's available for a professional.
No.
Yeah, I've seen him play football.
No. Can you imagine him right
there's
now
one
up
name
front at Liverpool?
Oh, there's one name that nobody's mentioned that we should be talking about, and that's Nate Diaz. I feel like he's a match to make with anyone. There's talks of him coming back down to 155 because he fought there before and he performed well at 155 as well. I think McGregor, instead of going for Poirier for a third one, I think he should go for the Diaz trilogy, man. Come back and do that, bad boy.
I'd love to see that. The build-up alone will be, if it's anything like the first one, will be unreal. But it's such a risk, man, because like Diaz is one of those guys. He's just the guy. The guy's just always on it. He's relentless, and like he has long spells of inactivity, but he always shows up prepared. And I think for McGregor, if he went in against a Diaz and lost, he's done. That's his career.
Yeah, I agree. If that, I think he would look towards boxing as a because he was obviously there's talks of a Pacquiao fight, which I mean, I don't know, bro. Pacquiao, you get it, like Pacquiao, bro. There's people.
I don't care if Pacquiao's 55, mate.
Listen, Pacquiao's pace alone is enough for most prospects, people at the elite level. That pace that he can hold, and I don't like doubting anybody. Truly, in any combat sport, I don't like doubting anybody. But Pacquiao, man, there's only so much you're going to slow down. His pace is insane.
Pacquiao gets better with age. Pacquiao just gets better with age.
Matures like a fine wine, does Pacquiao.
Listen, he gets better with age. If you don't believe me, look at his last 2 performances against Furman and Broner. I believe the Furman performance was one of the best of his careers. The guy is just, he's on another level. But that's all we've got time for. Go on, Mickey, I'll let you fit in quickly. I know you.
I was about to say Chuck Chino Maidana in that bad boy. See what happens, man. Who knows?
No. Maidana's not. Maidana is. I'm not believing this whole comeback thing. He said it to me.
My boy Chino's coming back, bro. Don't say that. He's coming back.
Well, it's great for the sport of boxing. It's great for the sport of boxing if he does come back, but I don't believe it happens. But that's all we've got time for on this week's all new Lights Out MMA podcast. Massive shout out to Vaz Khan, and of course a massive shout out to Jacob Stitch Duran and yourself as well, Micky Mills. As always, we'll be following the rest of your career. I know we're going through some bad times right now, but just keep your head up. The fight day will be coming for you soon, man. Just keep the faith, and make sure you give these guys a follow on social media. We'll be sharing the links in the description. Make sure you check out that full interview with Jacob Stitch Duran, and of course, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Vaz, Mickey, thank you for joining us today, and to the viewers out there, thank you for listening to the all new Lights Out MMA podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening.